Good evening, everyone. This is Pradeep, Ambassador of Change from GETI, the Global Education and Training Institute from Lucknow. And we are the premier institute for training teachers and principals throughout India. We have many pre-service and in-service programs. And for more information on this, please go to 740-840-1000. Right now, you are on our disruptive education platform provided to us by our mentor, Dr. Sunita Gandhi. And on this platform, we have met with and interacted with more than 1,400 educators from India and all over the world. And this evening, we have for you Professor Shantanu Chakrabarti from the University of Calcutta, from Kolkata, West Bengal. And he is a numismatist, a swimmer, as well as he likes doing studies on what makes hate profitable, very, very significant for today. He holds an honorary position of the convener of the academic committee at the Institute of Foreign Policy Studies in the University of Calcutta. He is the honorary president of the Association of European Studies in India, the AESI, and the deputy editor-in-chief in the editorial board of Sos Unki Maids Naro Dove. I hope I pronounced it correct. So, International Relations General Faculty of Political Science and International Studies of the University of Warsaw. He is also a member in the advisory board of the UNISCI, the Research Unit on International Security and Cooperation, University of Madrid in Spain. He held the position of a research fellow at the Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, IDSA, in New Delhi, India from 2007 to 8. He was awarded the Bene Merito Award by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Government of Poland in 2014. So he seemed very interested in Eastern Europe. He was selected for the Indian Council for Cultural Relations, ICCR, and the India chair at Dublin. All right, sorry for that. His research interests include contemporary history of South Asia, South Asian regional dynamics, Indian foreign policy, peace and conflict studies, and private security. So thank you, sir, for being with us. Good evening, and over to you, sir.
Thank you, Pradeep ji. It's a pleasure. And thanks for your kind invitation to share some of my thoughts in this.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, yes. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me now? Am I audible? Hello? Am I audible?
Slightly off. Yes, your Wi-Fi is slightly off, but we can hear you, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you very much. I thank the organization.
You're audible, sir.
Yes, okay, I'm continuing.
You're audible, sir. Please carry on.
Yes, thank you.
You're audible, sir. Please carry on.
Yes, I'm continuing. So I begin by thanking the organization of GETI for their kind invitation to share some of my thoughts with you today on multiple
Sir, you're
modes.
audible. Please carry on.
Yes, I'm continuing. Can you hear me? I am to share some of my thoughts on the nature of multimodal nature of education in current times. Uh, I would briefly argue that we are all aware of uh, multimodal nature of education uh, during COVID times, as we all of us in various capacities had to restructure our institutional basis for education, whether we teach in schools, colleges, or universities, or in other sort of private organizations. Online teaching or online education dissemination. If dissemination of education is the main purpose of education, then for last 2 to 3 years, as we have seen, this has become much more technical oriented in the sense we are having to depend largely on online connections, internet dissemination of education through internet, etc. That is, we have managed to decentralize our education. What has been main focus of the state-oriented education of building up or strengthening of infrastructure, mainly in the form of schools, colleges, universities. That is, that has taken a hit because of COVID. We are, instead of institutionalizing, we tend to now deinstitutionalize. We all know the patterns and formats. We are having to organize, teach online courses. We are having to conduct examination or oral interviews in an online manner. Increasingly, university or college or educational institutions meetings are being held online. uh, this has worked in two ways. In one hand, this has this has given us an opportunity to spread our uh, range of connectivity over a wide across area. Just take, for instance, any one of us wanting to introduce or wanting to arrange an international conference on any topic. Now, that would, and in organizing an international conference, we know how difficult it is. You have to obtain clearance for foreign scholars' visit. You have to obtain a clearance for the agenda for the seminar or conference, and then apart from MEA clearance, apart from visa, you also, in case of uh, people coming from particular countries, you know how stringent the MHA or Ministry of Home Affairs regulations could be. Uh, that online or organizing webinars has changed that. Just today I'm speaking here from Kolkata. Pradeep ji is in the lovely city of Lucknow, and all of you are joining on YouTube from various parts of the world. Uh, this perhaps it's not that this was not being done before 2019-20, but the nature, the range of such operations has increased. So, on the one hand, we have a sort of decentralization of education. Now, this brings to a question: is it a setback, or is it or and second question would be that is it something entirely new? Uh, and third, if it's not something entirely new, is there a long history behind it? So, being a student of history, I thought, and because we have around 25 to 30 minutes to talk about the experiences, I think I will tell you, I will narrate to you certain stories that we know that if you look at how education was sought to be uh, utilized or encouraged by the Indian state. By Indian state, I mean the Indian state starting from colonial times. Uh, we know, I'm not going to go too much details into history. We know the debates surrounding the education patterns, how in 1835 a sum of 1 lakh of rupees was granted, goods dispatch, etc. They decide to spend this money on dissemination of Western education, English education. There was enough debate for, and that was something which was being accepted. Uh, and that pattern would largely continue after independence by the Indian government also. If you look at the process in which Indian education departments, be it at the center or be it at the state level, the main thrust of education dissemination was institutionalization of education, opening up of schools, more schools at rural areas, primary schools, secondary schools, colleges, universities. To an extent, it became also a political issue of celebration, a political issue of concern. If you wanted votes, you need to announce opening up of an university in an entirely new areas. I'm sure all of us, when we have gone for inspection, there have been cases in which there is nothing. There is an open wheat field, and then with just a board that and new university. This is a site for new university, etc. But the thrust was, of course, on institutionalized education. And you have the way how why because it was thought that unless you can bring more and more students, particularly from rural areas, into an institutional setup, their education will suffer. Their parents or their guardians would be more interested in sending them for work to earn a living. So, you had various sorts of experimentations. The last major experimentation, which I remember, is offering students midday meals. Uh, uh, that if you come to school, you will at least get a meal. Even during Corona times when schools, etc., are closed, students are now being given, grains to cook at home, grains and vegetables to cook at home. So the process was to institutionalize education. But were there any counter views? Yes, of course. What I will briefly share with you four major counter views which tried to act as a counterweight to this process of institutionalization of education. I do not mean to say that both tendencies, the process or insistence that education must be institutionalized, and the opposers who wanted a much more decentralized process of dissemination of education rather than simply uh, bringing children to school and classroom teaching oriented. It's not that they did not have anything in common. There were a lot of things in common. But these are major true trends. And if you look at exactly the period when education, formalization of education was being done in India during colonial period, and then after independence in 1947 also, I would say it was a continuation. Uh, you also had four major, and if I try to identify four major experimentations with much more decentralized education process, uh, I would I would cite four examples. One, of course, is Rabindranath Tagore and his experimentations in Shantiniketan. We all know how Shantiniketan school was formed, But then it's not that it was completely decentralized. The course curriculum more or less tallied with the course being offered in mainstream schools. Uh, then, if you look at ashram life for students and teachers, there was a lot of regularization. It's not that you could do anything what you like, but it was not uh, a government school like education. A student had much more freedom. A student, as Tagore argued, had more opportunities towards holistic education, being one with nature, doing some other sort of things apart from by reading and learning by heart textbooks only. Now, along with that, but it's not that it was only theoretical experimentations. As I said, there was a deep sense of trying to make the students integrate with their society. Uh, Tagore's experimentation in Shantiniketan would also continue in Sriniketan, where an agricultural learning institute would be opened up under his son. And he sent one of his son to United States to learn new modern techniques of agricultural cultivation, using of tractors, new sorts of high-yielding variety seeds, etc. And he also brought in experts, foreign experts like Elmhurst, etc., for experimenting in the Shantiniketan area. So, as I said, it may be regarded as a way of trying to challenge institutionalized pattern of education during colonial times, but there were enough elements of institutionalizing process involved in Tagore's experimentations. But where it was opposed, why I'm saying it was a counter view, because Tagore's, when Shantiniketan School and then the Vishwabharati as university was opened up and accepted by the colonial government in 1921. And when Vishwabharati started offering degrees, there was a great deal of confrontation between some of the leading educationists in Bengal during that time. I mean, one major person who opposed Tagore, who he was a devoted disciple of Tagore, but he opposed Tagore's experimentations. This was a person, the famous historian Jadunath Sarkar, J.N. Sarkar. I think most of us have heard or read about his commendable works on Mughal history, particularly on Aurangzeb. Now, Jadunath Sarkar, if you look at the correspondence between Tagore and Jadunath Sarkar, who for some time was vice chancellor of Calcutta University, he said this is not a way to educate. I mean, you can experiment, but unless it's done through an institutionalizing process, you cannot really disseminate education in this manner. Now, whatever it was, whether it was accepted or not, it remained one major example of uh, trying to disseminate an experimentation of disseminating education in another format rather than through the institutionalization of process of classroom teaching. The second process, which I would refer to, was almost contemporary when Shantiniketan was formed. This was creation of an uh, language called Esperanto. Esperanto, late 19th century, it was a Polish Jew person. I mean, when he uh, started in this language, it was not part of Poland. The place where he belonged to still belonged to Soviet Union. There was no Soviet Union then. Still belonged to Russian Empire. But later on, it became a part of Poland. Esperanto, as a language, introduced in 1887-88, tried to create a global community where, though most of the letters, most of the words would derive from European languages, there were inclusion of other languages in this process also. And Esperanto uh, became, in certain intellectual circles, as a very important process. They tried to obtain, official recognition for it at the League of Nations as well as United Nations. United Nations has not officially recognized Esperanto as a language yet, but it accepts it as a major experimentation. And the height was of experimentations in Esperanto language, a common language for the global community, how significant it would be in disseminating of education, etc. Also, or in encouraging connectivity was something which was discussed, debated, uh, and the height of, I still remember till around 1970s, 1980s, you had during book fairs organized in various places in India, Esperanto bookstores. I do not see them as frequently anymore. I don't know whether, and in fact, now you don't even need Esperanto language, because you now have technological ability. With Google, you can simply type or speak one language, and it would translate it for you. May not be very perfect, 100% perfect, but it should work, especially if you're traveling at a place where you do not know even a word of that place. So Tagore's Shantiniketan experimentations, Esperanto language, the third major non-institutionalized non-institutionalizing process of experimenting with the disseminating of education was, of course, Mahatma Gandhi's famous Warda scheme of 1930s. In 1937, officially that scheme was undertaken. We all know about the Zakir Hussain Committee. Once again, Mahatma Gandhi almost was similar to Tagore. He wanted students, but unlike Tagore, Mahatma Gandhi wanted the language of instruction to be in mother tongue, and Mahatma Gandhi wanted students to be very much involved. Apart from education, he wanted their involvement in craft production. The idea was that education should provide them with an opportunity for better jobs, for jobs, so that they don't only have to, after with a degree, they don't only have to apply in government offices looking for a government job or in private offices in urban areas. He wanted a totally integrated education process. But what the scheme, though it was given official or semi-official recognition after independence, because it was in honor of Mahatma Gandhi, if you look at the way government visualized education, whether it was creating of IITs as major technical institutions, whether it was setting up of more universities and education, the setting up of the University Grants Commission for much more controlling the institutionalization process of education dissemination. I don't think government of India really toyed in a serious manner with the Warda scheme of education. But it was an important experimentation. The last example which I would use is more contemporary. It's something, we today talk about international greater connectivity, web connectivity during these corona times, how it has increased. But this is something which was also tried out where institutionalization process was largely absent, and it perhaps could be tried out in our areas also, particularly in rural areas where a lot of students still find internet connectivity to be more expensive and too infrequent, where service is not good. This is something, an experimentation which was tried out in Africa in around 2007, 2008. This was a network created called Ushahidi Network. Ushahidi Network essentially is a free platform, free for platform where which creates opportunities for you to connect, create your own groups, etc. It also provides accessible technical solutions, empowering committees to advance social change. Ushahidi Network particularly became popular in 2008 when all these when government official government was of Kenya after a violent election there. The new elected government was trying to clamp down on newspapers, television channels, whatever internet you had in 2008. And then the Ushahidi network came up. as a way of connecting, disseminating information, political information. But later on, Ushahidi has been used for multitasking. For instance, it discusses a lot of things regarding education dissemination, uh, poverty alleviation, uh, better crop technology, provision of yeah, to set up provision of loans for other small entrepreneurs, particularly women. So something which has been tried out. It's not strictly speaking a scheme for education, but it's a way in which they tried to you know, uh, decentralize the connectivity process. And of course, a lot of that helped in disseminating education also in extremely rural areas in Africa. Now, I'm almost at the end of my 30 minutes. So what I will do is, if we look at all these four major experimentations, the idea is, did these experimentations really work? As you know, uh, for governments, whether colonial government, whether Indian government, the process was to institutionalize, and you cannot blame the government. I mean, it's difficult for governments to completely decentralize things. Uh, so all these experiments, are these important only because these occurred at particular times in history? So it's important for your history examination or your international relations examination. Uh, Not really, because if you look at the four types of non-institutional approaches towards education dissemination I have talked about, it has influenced a lot of people. Travelers, education, of course, is not only disseminated at in classroom. Education can be provided, can be disseminated through works, memoirs, writings, letters left behind by travelers. A lot of travelers, and I will, because of shortage of time, I will just use two examples. One was a Lithuanian linguist scholar named Anastas Poshka. Poshka was a very interesting person. Poshka belonged to Lithuania. He was a linguist. There was a lot of experimentations during late 19th and early 20th century regarding similarity of Aryan languages, Indo-Aryan languages, which is spoken in Eurasian region, Lithuania, Poland, all these areas, and of course in India, the early roots of Sanskrit. And you had a lot of linguists coming in from those areas throughout early 20th century. But Poshka's case was important. Why? Because Poshka was an adventurer also. He was not only a scholar. He decided, he was an anthropologist, he was an adventurer, and of course he was a linguist. He decided to travel from Lithuania to India on a motorbike. He arrived up to Iran, and then from Iran, he was traveling with another of his friend. His friend went up to Southeast Asia, but Poshka took a ship, took a boat, and crossed over into Bombay. He studied in Bombay University. It was still not Mumbai University. He arrived in India around 1929, and he studied in Bombay University for some time. Then, on a motorbike, he came to Calcutta. He enrolled for a PhD in Calcutta University. He also traveled to Shantiniketan, maintained contacts with Tagore, translated some of Tagore's works. Later on, as Second World War was going on, and just after it had ended, he returned back to Lithuania. He was immediately arrested by Stalin's secret police as a non-conformist, non-communist intellectual, and was imprisoned in Siberia for 5 to 6 years. Much of his work got lost during that time. He came back later, but could not complete his PhD and could not travel to India again. In a scene of emotion, his daughter came to Calcutta University. Poshka is no longer alive. His daughter is also a scholar. She is not a linguist, but she is a scholar. She is a scientist. She came to Calcutta University, and Calcutta University gave an honorary PhD to Poshka. So it's not that how did he not learn about India? Not through the institutional process of education. He did enroll. He worked for some time at Calcutta Museum, Indian Museum in Calcutta. He enrolled formally for a PhD degree, but he could not complete it. For him, dissemination of education was collecting materials, going to new areas, collecting examples of linguistics, how people spoke. That's one example, and I will end with another example. This is of a Bengali gentleman, Hiranmay Ghoshal. Now, usually, as we know, our flow of intellectuals was mainly towards Western Europe, particularly Great Britain and later on UK. Because of our colonial setting, we understand the English language better. Hiranmay Ghoshal was belonged to upper middle class Bengali family in Calcutta. He did his graduation here, and then he went for his PhD. He also was a linguist. He went for his PhD in UK, where he did it on dramas of Anton Chekhov, and then started to work in Warsaw University Linguistics Department. Why is Hiranmay Ghoshal important? Hiranmay Ghoshal is important because he started teaching in Warsaw University in 1935, and uh, he was uh, stuck in Warsaw when Second World War began, and German Nazis attacked Poland in 1939. He was at, he could not escape. He stayed there. He had to stay there for 6 months. Tried to escape by walking along with his fiancee, and then had to turn back to Warsaw again. And he leaves behind his account. Managed to come back to India in 1941 in an excellent account in Bengali, which was produced in 1941. He teaches you. It you know you know. Hiranmay Ghoshal was important for a lot of other factors also. After 1947, he was appointed in Indian embassy in Moscow also. There, under some mysterious circumstances, he got dismissed around 1951. Uh, there are some of his unpublished diaries which are pretty explosive regarding his comments on Indian administration, Indian bureaucracy right after independence, etc. I'm not going to venture into that. But Hiranmay Ghoshal's accounts, because he was a linguist, he was teaching Indian languages in Warsaw University from 1935. He was also a person who was meeting various Indian revolutionaries, staying abroad. He was talking in terms of the great linguistics linkages. So if you look at, and then after his Warsaw University job goes during Second World War, he was desperately trying to get a job. He tried to travel all around the world, tried to, but he couldn't get a permanent job because of various political factors, which I'm not going to get into. And much later, back in 60s, he once again went back to Poland and resumed teaching there till he died there around 1969. But Poshka and Hiranmay Ghoshal's examples are important to show that, in a way, dissemination of education is can often be done in a manner which is non-official, non-institutional, because both of them throw a range of light. If you look at Poshka's accounts, not only on linguistics, his travel accounts, how this person on a bike was traveling through from Lithuania till up to Iran, and then taking a boat from there, landing in Mumbai, and then once again coming to Eastern India here. Uh, so education, in the sense, if education, as Swami Vivekananda had once said, is to awaken your essence, what is best in you. Uh, there is, of course, a purpose for a need for institutionalization of education, but there are education can also be disseminated in a multi-mode format. And I would conclude by saying that throughout the, because of the COVID related situation, we are increasingly having to experiment with some of these multi-mode formats. Yes, it's difficult. We still have technical glitches, technical difficulties. Uh, there are internet connectivity is still poor in our rural areas, etc. But this is perhaps one area where we have to move forward. There is no other alternative. Even if situation uh, normalizes completely 100% in another 1.5 year 2 years, my hunch is that these these sort of multi-mode formats with which we are experimenting today is going to continue in the future also. I think I will end here today, and I would be very happy to take any questions if there are. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for being with us and for that very illuminating talk on education in multiple formats, a brief survey, as you said. And so when we do return to normal times, normal means it's never going to be normal, but when you do return to normal times, uh, what do you expect? I mean, is it going to be online, offline, both, or what is it going to be? Because once we have short memories here, and we will probably use online to ensure extra work for the students, which they are going to hate, and we'll go back to the normal mode of the classroom teaching.
I think you're correct, sir, in saying probably the hybrid mode is going to continue in the future. But I'm even let's see how educational institutes look at these things. For instance, organizing, as I was talking earlier, organizing an international conference. You have to invite guests, you have to keep them in hotel, you have to arrange accommodation, their flight or train tickets, you have to arrange for a hall for conference, etc. Online mode or a webinar completely ends your need for these things. You see, and there, if you look at the institutional process, I there are numerous universities where there is a severe cut in the budget available for conferences right now.
True.
So my hunch is in next 2 3 years, the government might encourage these sort of things. If not, technical difficulty would all, of course, be there. But if the institutional authorities feel that they are saving money, my hunch is they would insist more on these sort of online stuff, at least in the times to come.
True, sir. So thank you very much for that, and good evening. And before we leave, I request you to watch our detox, which are from the Disruptive Literacy Movement by Global Dream. This has been an initiative taken up by Dr. Sunita Gandhi since 2014. The whole idea is to ensure literacy and numeracy for all our not so fortunate brothers and sisters, and by a people's movement. So basically, each one teach one, and those of us who can teach more than one should be doing so to ensure some sort of a equal base for all the citizens of India. And basic literacy, we're not talking about anything in advance, or basic literacy. And we have many talks on this every day. So for more information on what talks you would like to tune into, please go to 740-840-1000. So thank you, sir. Good evening, everybody. Good night, and
Thank you.
see you again tomorrow. Thank you, sir, so
Thank you,
much.
sir. Thanks.
Shantanu Chakrabarti, sir.
Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure.